So hello everyone, my name is Joel Hoots. I work with Veterans Career Program, and you're joining us today on our Veterans Career Live to discuss how to decide on a major in college. So we're going to be going over a few different factors to consider through this presentation. First one being interests, and then strengths and weaknesses, salary and satisfaction, career opportunities, and then labor market information or research. So let's jump right into interests. So really, this is a question you kind of need to ask yourself. What is it that you like to do? And more importantly, I think, what is it that you don't like to do? I think that question is just as important when we're looking for, a lifelong career or even our next job. If it's, if you find out something you don't like, that's just something you can check off your list and move on from there. So some things you might want to consider with what you do like is what classes you might have liked in high school. Did you like math? Were you more apt to like English and writing and things like that? What past jobs did you enjoy the most? I mean, and sometimes this may be difficult. If you're younger, you may not have a lot of experience in the workforce, or you may only have experience in, say, a retail setting, and you may find that you either like it or don't like it. Another thing is, what do you like to do in your free time? I think this one is really important because, what we get to do in our free time, we have the freedom to decide that. And that really shows kind of a link between what we could do with our future selves. So there's a couple places you can kind of go check this out, and there's some interest inventories out there. One is at mynextmove.org, which is part of ONET. And on this next slide here, you can see, so this is what's called the ONET Interest Profiler. And ONET online is a resource that vocational rehabilitation counselors use quite frequently to research different jobs. It has a wealth of information on basically every job that's in the economy, as far as we know. There are some things that are left out probably, some obscure things, but for the most part, it covers just about everything. But this interest survey will take you through a list of about 60 questions and ask you on how your interests relate to jobs. Now, it's important to note, it's always good to go through this with a trained professional like a VRC, like myself, or anyone else on our staff, because some of this stuff is not just straightforward. Just because you like something on here does not necessarily mean that's going to be a good fit for you. All this is a link between your interests and what jobs are in the economy. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be interested in every single job on there. So keep that in mind as we go through this. So basically, when you get through the questionnaire, it's going to give you this page right here, and this is what we call in our profession the Holland codes. So it's a set of 6 general interests, and it uses your score to suggest jobs in similar areas. And as you can see with our interest profiler here, whoever took this, it wasn't me, they scored in the artistic and conventional category. They actually had the same score. So typically what you do is you take the 2 highest scores, and that's going to be your what we call the Holland code. So it could be AC or CA for artistic and conventional. With this particular individual, it looks like they tied on the conventional and artistic, so you can actually add a third one in, which would be the next highest, which is social. So you can actually have a 3-letter score in this instance. And when you get to this point, if you notice on the right there, there's links to all the different categories. So what you can do is click on that link and read more about it and see if that kind of relates to your personality and the kind of things you'd like to do, or just the kind of tasks that you like to do. So we're not going to get into it too much today, but you can go dig into it a little bit more. And it's really interesting to read about that and see, if you think that it matches how you visualize yourself. So the next step we kind of want to look at is strengths and weaknesses. So what are your skills currently? What are you good at? Are you good at working with your hands? Are you good at working with abstract things? Are you good at whatever it may be? Try to identify those things, and it may be good to write these things down, and even ask your friends and family, what do you see as my strength? Because a lot of the times other people see things in us that we don't see ourselves. So it's good to get some feedback, especially from people that are close to you, not strangers or anything, but close friends, close family. It can be good just to have their insight as well. And then what subjects or tasks are you good at? And this can kind of relate back to school, areas of study, like we have in the next bullet. So again, did you really like math class? Are you really good with numbers? That could lead to something like accounting, but you may not like the paperwork that goes along with that. So maybe if you're good with working with your hands and you like numbers, that could go towards engineering or something like that. So it's really good to kind of evaluate yourself and understand what your areas of interest are and what tasks you're good at. And then, are there any areas of study that are difficult for you? Myself, I was never a big fan of English. I was always kind of better at the math stuff. That's just how my brain worked. But I'm not even in a type of math profession now. It was more about what I wanted to do with my life as opposed to what I was necessarily better at. But with through practice and everything, I get better at writing and better at researching and things like that. And then you might want to identify that kind of goes into identifying your weaknesses. So understanding where your strong suits are just as important as understanding where you might need a little bit of work, because you may need to work a little bit harder at those things if that's something you want to work towards. Again, me personally, having English be a weakness, I had to work at it a little bit harder to become a better writer. So that's something to think about when you're moving into thinking about a major, because this is all kind of, you're going to have classes related to all these things. So you want to make sure that, you have strengths there, although you're going to have some classes that, you may not have strengths in. So you're going to have to work a little bit harder at those things. So pay and satisfaction is, I would say, probably one of the biggest considerations. A lot of people today I talk to, what they're really looking for is satisfaction in their job. However, that pay has to be commensurate with that satisfaction. Otherwise, that satisfaction can again go down. So sometimes, unfortunately, you do have to choose between an emotionally rewarding job or one that pays well. If you're lucky, this won't be a question, but oftentimes people want to work in a helping profession, kind of similar to what we do here. You may have to sacrifice a higher salary in order to do what you love. And that's just the reality of the world we live in. There are higher paying jobs that you can get. Say, as an accountant, you may help people, but it's not the same kind of help. So it may be, you may not feel that you're really helping people, and you may have a lot of more dissatisfaction with your job, but you may get paid well for doing what you do. And that may, that could offset the dissatisfaction. However, I find that, the longer you work in jobs that you're not satisfied with, you tend to get detached, and then you end up kind of looking out for other things, and you may end up looking in the same career field because you think it's a job when really it's the career field that you're in that you're not satisfied with, and it may not be the pay either. So it's definitely something to consider. So when you're thinking about your major, you want to think about what that major is going to lead to as far as jobs. Where are those jobs in the local economy, wherever you want to be or live? And does it pay enough to support you in the lifestyle that you want to have? So, if it depends, do you want to own a house? Do you want to have a new car? Are you satisfied with buying used cars? Are you satisfied with renting? A lot of these are questions you're going to have to take into consideration. And further down the line, you may want to consider if you want to have kids or anything like that. A lot of those things, need to be taken into consideration when considering what you go to school for and what that end goal is going to be for the career. And then again, is the pay the most important part to you? Is if you're only concerned about, a high paying job, a good place to start may be business, because, there's a lot of jobs out there in business that do offer high pay, but you're going to want to probably specialize in something as well. And then even though I'm skilled in this job, am I going to enjoy doing it? So you may be, like I mentioned, I was good at math. I may have been very skilled at being an accountant, but would I have been happy doing the same work every day? The way I see that is very repetitive work. It's very attention to detail, making sure all your T's are crossed and I's are dotted. I probably wouldn't be very happy working in that field. So that's a question everyone needs to really ask themselves. Is this going to be something that I'm going to be satisfied with in the long term? And some good ways to kind of get an idea about that is doing internships while you're in school. Some classes will actually require a practicum, and you get that real world experience. And so I would say, learn as much as you can in those experiences to determine if, is this the job for me? And you can find out early, as opposed to getting a degree in something and then finding out after the fact that, it's really not for you, and you've invested about, 4 years into a degree or so, and you may have to go back to school if you want to do something else. So it's a good question to ask. And then, will I be satisfied with the work I do each day? And that kind of goes back to that same ideology. Um, is that's something you got to think about when we're going through this stuff. So I would really kind of ask yourself these questions again. Ask family and friends if they think you'd be good at this, or if you see those skills in them that they'd be good at. This link I put in here for lifestyle calculators, and there's one in Texas particularly. That's where I'm located at. There's one in Texas called Texas Reality Check, and this is a really great it's a really great lifestyle calculator, and it's called Reality Check for a reason, because it kind of puts you in your place. It humbles you a little bit to determine, hey, this is it goes through many different factors. If you want to have pets, if you want to own a house, if you want to have a car, are you going to be saving? Are you going to be, having personal care, entertainment? Do you plan on traveling? What kind of clothing do you need? Do you need work clothes? Do you need suits and ties? Do you need dresses, or just need casual clothes? What kind of transportation again you want? Do you get to use public, or again, own a car? So that goes into a whole lot of different details, and you have to really answer these things honestly. And you also need to think ahead a little bit, because it does get into, do you want to have family or kids? If you don't have those now, you may want to determine, even if it's 20 years later, but yes, I do want to have this, so I do want to have children or something like that, and a spouse. So it's good to think ahead with those things and add those in, and you can always go back and change them back and forth. And unfortunately, we're not going to go through that today, but you can look it up in Texas Reality Check. But this is specifically for Texas. It'll give you the lifestyle calculator for a specific city or area in Texas. However, there are other lifestyle calculators. I found a few in other states, but you can search by your state and then put lifestyle calculator. So you can put, for example, Ohio lifestyle calculator, or lifestyle calculator Ohio. And then the jumpstart.org, that is a general one. It doesn't really cover necessarily the area you're in, but it gives you a general idea of what things are going to cost and how much money you're going to need to make in order to have the lifestyle you want. So it's a really, really cool, I guess it's kind of an app, but it gives you a lot of information. And the thing I like a lot about the Texas Reality Check is that when you get to the end, it'll total everything up and say, hey, you need to make $60,000 in order to have the lifestyle you want. It goes a little bit further than that, and it gives you links to different jobs that pay that salary. So then you can kind of browse through and see if there's anything of interest for you there. I think that's probably the most valuable thing about this Texas Reality Check is giving you that real world, the real world jobs that are out there in that local economy. You can research those jobs, find a little bit more about them, find out what skills and tasks might be involved, what kind of degrees you might need to get into that field. So this is a really good place to start, especially if you're in Texas. If not, like I said, check some of those other ones. They're not all created equal. So I would be careful looking through those, and I would try to, as much as possible, find something that gives you the local economy, because each state is different. Like, it may cost more to live in California than it does in, say, Montana. So you're going to want to find that local resource that shows you, what it's going to, because they take a lot of the costs for just the local economy and things like that into account. So it's important to find that local resource. So career opportunities, what jobs or careers are aligned with the major that you're choosing? And I always say, as far as figuring out what you want to do when you go to college, I like to work backwards. It's called backwards planning. So typically you want to find out what job you want first. So if you know what the end goal is, that you may not take a straight line to get there. It may be, back and forth, back and forth. You may take a few steps back and a few steps forward. But as long as you have that end goal in mind, that what you want to do, it's a lot easier to get there because you know where the destination is. So, for example, as a vocational rehab counselor, there's basically one path to go on. There's a couple lineations you can go out on, but for the most part, there are degree programs or master degree programs for rehabilitation counseling. And then, for a bachelor's degree, you may want to be in like social services or something like that. But that's not necessarily the case, because you may, get a master's degree in something that you didn't necessarily have a bachelor's degree in. But it's always best, if you want to be an engineer, you're not going to get a degree in business, because you would need a degree in engineering to work as an engineer. So it's always good. I always say, plan backwards from the job. Pick the job you want first, and then start looking at the schools and see, okay, what majors align with these jobs to look into, and then making sure, hey, am I going to be able to do this task? Am I going to be able to complete these classes? Are my strengths within these classes and things like that? And it kind of all goes, you see, it all kind of ties together with what we were talking about in the first few slides. And that, that kind of ties into the next one. What majors align with the job I want to do? This is something you can talk to, a vocational rehab counselor about. ONET Online has a lot of resources on there. It'll tell you, you can look up the different degrees that people have in that field to get an idea of kind of what to go towards. And then, are there jobs associated with this major? So that's a really important thing. You don't want to get a major in something to find out, 4 years later, there's no jobs in the local economy. So again, ONET is a great place to research those jobs, and you can actually see job growth over the next 10 years. So it'll typically show you, we'll actually get into some of those. We'll get into some of the links for the ONET slides coming up. So I'll wait to talk about that. And then, another question is, do I need a degree to do the job I really want? So there's a lot of jobs you don't need a degree for. I mean, there's plenty of customer service jobs to get into where you may just need a certification or something like that. But there's also trades. Trades are very important jobs. They're typically very good paying jobs. And that may just be OJT, which is on the job training. So it's really good to, it's like if you want to be a plumber, an electrician, sometimes a lineman for like the power lines and things like that. You may not need a degree. You get to work outside, work with your hands. Sometimes construction, you may not need a degree. However, if you want to run a construction site, you may need, architectural or engineering or business degree even. So it's really good to look into some of those things. And another thing to do is, branch out, talk to the schools you want to attend, see what other people have kind of majored in. They're going to have a good indication of, what jobs are available, what majors lead to those jobs and things like that. Another really cool thing is, if you are on campus or something and they have job fairs, you can go talk to the different jobs, ask them, what kind of people they're looking for, what kind of skill sets they're looking for, and more importantly, if they are looking for a degree, and what degree they want most likely to get into those positions. So there's a lot of resources once you're kind of on campus. And it's never too early to visit and, look up those resources, look up the different job fairs. You can always visit those things. A lot of high schools do it. So you can, if you're a high school student looking as college for your next step, that's a good place to start. And then the last thing is really just an online job search and investigation. So going on Indeed and things like that, you can actually very easily look up yourself, say you want to work in, let's say you want to work in photography. So you can go look up photography jobs and see, what's out there. I use photography specifically because if we looked on ONET right now, there's a negative job growth for it. And that typically means there's not jobs in the economy, but there could be jobs, that you create yourself, because a lot of photographers nowadays are kind of on their own. They have Facebook pages, social media, and things like that, how they advertise. And they can kind of do that on their own. They don't have a whole staff or, a brick and mortar building where they have a company. It just may not be something that's out there available to somebody who wants to be a photographer. So that would be a good indication that, we shouldn't do that. Or, that you're, not that you shouldn't do it, but that you may need to kind of do it on your own or start your own business or start your own project, however it may be. But, let's say, for instance, you want to look for an engineering job. You can go and look what the requirements are, what that employer is looking for. Typically, it'll say preferred. You'll have preferred requirements and just plain requirements. So those preferred requirements usually will say, they want so and so much experience, so maybe 4 to 8 years experience. And then the regular requirements may be that you need a bachelor's degree in one of the engineering modalities. So it could be mechanical, electrical. Some may be more specific. And then some may be requiring additional certifications, which you can, apply for and acquire while you're in your college education. So you kind of get those in conjunction. So that's a really good place to start. That's why I say do the backward planning. Start with a job search. Find out what these jobs are looking for. Typically, it's not going to change a whole lot within that 4 years. Some things may be added on, but typically the schools are going to be aware of that and are going to do their best to get you into the right program to make sure you have all the skills you need to acquire your first job out of college. And again, you can always do internships and things like that along the way, which will help. So, and this kind of gets us into the labor market information. So, this is something you can use ONET for, and again, you can just use Indeed for. You can do your own job search. If you're searching for a job and you're searching for maybe an electrical engineer, let's say, and nothing's coming up in your area, you may realize, hey, this may not be the best career field to go into right now because there's no jobs around me. Now, if you're considering moving, that may be something you may want to look into the area you're moving to, and if there's an abundance of jobs, it can be good to be like, okay, well, maybe this is the right path, and I'll just have to move out of where I'm living to get out there. And I've seen this happen sometimes with, I've had previous clients in the past who, were going to school to be a game designer, but they lived in a very rural area of Texas. And, my first question was, well, do you plan on moving out of Texas? They said no, and I was kind of confused because I was like, well, it may not be the best option if you want to stay here, because how many game designers do you know in your area? And the answer was 0, because there was no game designers in that area. So he may have had to move to, another state to find a job doing that. And we were able to kind of correct that and look at different options for jobs that he might want to find in his area. But that's one question you want to ask is, are people hiring for this job right now? And then, are they going to be hiring 4 years from now when I'm out of school? So that's something you can find on Indeed, or I'm sorry, not on Indeed, on ONET online very easily. So on the page, you can look up any job and you can go to that page and then look at the growth. And typically they have a little sun next to them. And I'll show you that actually on the next slide. It'll tell you the growth over the next 10 years. So this kind of goes beyond your 4-year degree program. So you'll see, okay, yes, there are going to be jobs, and they basically rate them on, if it's growing a little bit to a lot to not at all. Are there jobs in my area? Am I going to have to move? We kind of mentioned that a little bit already. If you're in a very rural area that has very minimal jobs, you may have, fast food and some small retail places and, maybe some small family-owned businesses, but nothing in your field. So you may have to consider moving out of that area unless you, can find or make a job there for yourself. And how much do people in my field make in different regions of the country? Now, this is really important because, depending on where you're living, you may have, especially if you're in a rural area, the cost of living may be very low. If you move to a bigger city, there may be more taxes to pay. If you're looking to buy a home, car, anything like that, it could be more expensive. Food could be more expensive. Gas could be more expensive. So it's good to kind of look around. I'm not going to get into the websites too much, but there's the BLS.gov online, the ONET online, and then local state government websites will typically have your cost of living average. You can look that up on Google as well, just like a cost of living calculators. This is different than a lifestyle calculator. This will give you, your general idea of what it costs to live in an area for an average person. What those utilities are going to cost each month, what you may pay in gas each month. And you can get a lot of really great information. Before I actually took this job here in San Antonio, I did a lot of that research myself to find that San Antonio was actually 14% below the cost of living in similar cities. Now that has changed a little bit, but typically, this was a little bit less. So it helped me calculate, what, if my salary was going to be enough, if it was a smart move, all of that stuff. So it's really good. I mean, there's a lot more that goes into picking your degree than most people think. Some people think you're just going to show up, figure out what you want, and then go find a job afterwards once you have the degree. I always say, work backwards. Have as much information as possible to make the most informed choice. College is very expensive these days, and there's no point in wasting money on something that is not going to be beneficial to you in the future. And if you're using a GI Bill, that is very limited. I kind of cover some of this stuff in another video, GI Bill start to finish. But I mean, be intentional about using those benefits. make sure that that degree program is going to lead to something that you can effectively do for a long period of time, because that's the goal of getting a degree, is getting into a career field as opposed to a job. So I would just think about that a lot of this stuff when you're going into it. And it takes a little bit of work, but I always say invest in yourself as much as possible. You're going to be with yourself for a long time. So this is the next page. This is actually a page from ONET. This was a quick search for occupations related to nursing. So you see like in the search bar, we typed in nurse, and this is what came up. So we see a whole long list of different nursing professions. So there's informatics nurse specialists, registered nurses, acute care, health educators, veterinarian technologists and technicians. The list goes on. If you notice, there is a sun next to it, and you see that first one says Bright Outlook. So that job right there, all the jobs on this page do have a bright outlook. So if we were to click on one of those and scroll down on the page, you could see what the job growth is for the next 10 years. And it's going to be a higher percentage because it does have a bright outlook. They're looking for people to fill those positions right now and in the future. And that profession, people get in and out of, but you do have, you have a lot of trained nurses right now that may be retiring, so they need to replenish with new educated nurses who can do that job. So that's something to look for. There's also a green leaf if you're interested in like green energy jobs and things like that. They actually show that on some of these jobs. It just depends on what you search. With the nurses, it's not really a green healthcare field, or it's not really a green field because it is healthcare, rather, I should say. But pretty much all the nursing professions right now have a bright outlook. But it's a quick reference. So if you're looking through there and you say, oh, bright outlook for this type of nurse, you don't have to go necessarily click on that and research it further. You'll just know that it does have jobs in the future. And so finally, just a few reminders. Remember that Veterans Career Live is a resource for you, as well as our program and our counselors. Like I said, if you're planning on doing an interest inventory, and you don't have to do it through ONET, there's a vast array of interest inventories you can take. And this is not a personality test. I just kind of want to remind you, it's that like the INFP stuff, that's a little bit different. That's your personality and how you interact with other people. That's very important to understand too. But these interest inventories are how your interests relate to employment. And it's good to have someone help you kind of interpret those results a little bit, because I see a lot of people. I've actually done this with people, and I've seen the ONET results come up, and the first one is fast food worker, and they say, well, I have no interest in being a fast food worker. And what I let them know is that, well, that job is probably going to pop up no matter what your Holland code is, because everyone can basically meet those requirements to be a fast food worker. So it's good to have someone there to kind of interpret those results and things like that. So if you are interested in doing something like this and you think you can do it on your own, great. If not, and you want some feedback or someone just to kind of walk through it with you, you can always reach out to us and let us know. Any of our counselors would be happy to do it. And then we have we have other recorded presentations as well. I mentioned the GI Bill start to finish. That might be something good to look into if you're a veteran wanting to use your GI Bill. I think these videos tie together very well as far as researching your major and then getting into using your GI Bill actually, and how those payment plans work and things like that. You can access us at pva.org, Veterans Career Program. There's a whole list of topics. We do live ones as well. This one is pre-recorded, but we have live versions that you can actually have question and answers at the end. So we'll have real-time question and answers. And then you can access our library full of a variety of other career topics. And you can return as often as you like. You can review the videos again if you forgot something, and then we add new ones as much as possible. So I thank you for your attention. Again, my name is Joel Hoots with the Vocational Rehab Counselor with PVA. Thank you for joining us.
Since 1946, PVA has been the leading advocate for veterans with spinal cord injuries and diseases such as MS and ALS. We help all veterans with disabilities by helping with earned benefits and specialized health care, education and career resources, adaptive sports, housing and legal assistance. Learn more at pva.org.